Welcome to Joy Meets World. I'm your host, Joy Yugi, and on this podcast, I'm sharing my adventures traveling around the U.S. to see the national parks with my dog, Quincy. So today I'm going to be talking about my stop over at Glacier National Park in northern Montana. The last place we left off was at Olympic National Park, which is in Washington State, on the coast of Washington State. So from there, I actually traveled 135 miles to Darrington, Washington, which is a little bit, I would say, an hour northeast of Seattle. It took me about 3.5 hours to get there. Darrington, Washington is close to the North Cascades National Park, which was founded in 1968. Unfortunately, North Cascades is closed in the winter, and up in Washington State, the winter lasts a lot longer than everywhere else in the country. So the park really doesn't open until May, and I was there in March. So I wasn't able to enter the park and to hike the park and to see it, but the North Cascades are all throughout that region. And so on my drive there, while I was in Darrington, and on my drive out of Washington, I was driving through the North Cascades, which are beautiful. And I felt so lucky to see them. Really magnificent snow-capped mountains. The great thing, even though I wasn't able to see the national park, the really fun thing was that that area is covered by a national forest. Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest. I'm not sure if I said that right. So I still got to do some really cool hiking in the North Cascades through that national forest, which was open. It was not snowy. It was in the 50s and 60s the week I was there. And so I got to do 2 hikes. The rest of the days, 80% of the time I was there, it was raining, which shouldn't surprise anyone who knows anything about Washington State. But there were 2 days that were sunny and in the 60s. And so Quincy and I got to hike Old Sauk Trail, which runs right beside the Sauk River. It's about a 3.5-mile hike through the forest, and it reminded me of Olympic National Park in Washington as well, just because the foliage was so green. It was so green everywhere, and all different shades of green. I like to say that what's growing on the trees. So there's a lot of lichen and moss growing on the trees, covering the trees, as a rule in Washington State, as far as I could observe. And it's this lime green kind of mossy substance. If you can imagine the live version of The Grinch and that kind of spidery lime green costume that he's wearing, that is what the trees look like they are wearing. So it's a really cool thing to see. Hard to process that that's what's on the trees, but it was a great hike. The Sauk River is really beautiful. The color is just this, it looks like it's dyed blue in some places, and the smoothest river rock. So no sand or dirt or silt, but just the bottom, and the shores are covered in these round, smooth river rock. We also did another day at a trail called Beaver Lake Trail. It's about the same distance. It was about 3.5-4 miles round trip. It was a there and back hike. It runs beside another arm or leg, however you want to say that, of the Sauk River. And the reason it gets its name is because it ends at a portion of the river that beavers have kind of taken over. And you can see their construction at the end of the trail, which is really cool. I don't know if I've ever actually seen that up close. We did not see any beavers, which, I would love to see wildlife, but also, on the other hand, I think Quincy would get too wild for me to handle if he saw a beaver. So it was on the All Trails app, which I use, it said this Beaver Lake Trail was an old railroad track that had been taken out and graded over. So it was supposed to be a graded trail, which seems like a pretty easy hike. The truth is it's graded for the first maybe 25 feet from the parking lot down to the trail, and then it's almost at some points invisible. I thought I was going to have to turn back. I could not see the trail. It gets so thin. It runs by the river, down by the river in part, so I think it had definitely flooded recently with the rains. It was very muddy, very wet, very kind of overgrown, and not kept up at all. So I'm assuming that's because the Park Service doesn't keep up with the trails over the winter, and technically in March it was still the winter. But there were a lot of fallen trees on the trail in big groups. So Quincy and I had to do a lot of climbing over and under to do this trail, which gave us a little bit of an extra workout. Darrington is just a small little town in the North Cascades, not much to speak of. Stayed in a cabin there that was a cabin. I wouldn't say it was my favorite spot, but, it did the job. I spent a lot of time at Moe's coffee shop in Darrington, and it is the cutest place. Has great coffee, beer, sandwiches, just a great little cafe. Lots of people stop in there. It was nice, a nice place to just be around other people while I was working in Darrington. So from Darrington, I traveled to Spokane, Washington, which is on the almost eastern edge of Washington State, and it was a 350-mile trip, about 5.5 hours. There's no national park there, but my next stop is Glacier National Park, and so it was a good halfway stopping point rather than driving a completely undoable amount of hours for me. I stopped over in Spokane, really loved Spokane, stayed in a little part of town called Brown's Addition, in a renovated Victorian / 1920s condo, technically. Really what happened, the history of Brown's Addition is that when Spokane Falls or Spokane was founded, it was in the downtown area where most people lived around the falls. And then the rich people started to build up in Brown's Addition, and it's named for the man who started building there. And it's on top of this really high overlook, so you can overlook the Spokane River. You can see all of Spokane. It's really beautiful. And so all of the rich people started building their really fancy houses up there in the late 1800s. So lots of Victorian homes there. And then in the 1920s, they started converting all of the Victorian homes in Brown's Addition into apartments. And so it's kind of got this Victorian flavor, but then on the inside, the apartments got this really sweet 1920s, 1930s vibe, like turn of the century. Really, really cool little apartment that I stayed at. Really loved it. Brown's Addition, very walkable. It's definitely, I would say, a neighborhood in transition. And so it's very quiet, nice, walkable. There's a central park, but you can tell that it's really trying to come back. There are some really cool restaurants, really cool renos, but then there are some places that are still trying, we'll put it that way. It is walkable. It's about 1.5 miles, I want to say, walk into downtown Spokane, which is cool. I walked there. The whole time I was there, got to try some local breweries, some local coffee shops and bakeries. So that was really cool. Definitely recommend visiting Spokane. From Spokane, then, I finally traveled to Martin City, Montana. It was about 263 miles and 4.5 hours. Martin City is not what it sounds like. I don't even think it has a stop sign in town. One of those little towns that's about 30 minutes north of Kalispell and 20 minutes south of the entrance to West Glacier National Park. I stayed in a little cabin, really cute, and did actually get to visit Glacier National Park. So, like many of the parks, I said this a lot, in the north, winter goes until May. And so the parks remain closed until May. From pretty much May to October is the only time the parks are open. Even in October, they start to close because I think they just don't deal with the snow. I don't want to deal with the winter. So everything that I had read said Glacier would be closed, just like North Cascades. I wouldn't be able to get in. So I just looked for a hike as close to the park as I could, not really knowing anything about the geography and the entrances to the park. But it's just so happened that the hike that I chose was inside the national park, not knowing, and it was open. The entrance to West Glacier was open. So I got in, and going to the Sun Road apparently is open for many, many miles up past McDonald Lodge, which is on Lake McDonald. So that made me really happy. I was surprised in a great way. I got to see Lake McDonald, which is a clear, clear mountain lake and has that river rock on the bottom of it. It was icy in some spots, like iced over, but in others not. You got the clearest view of the mountains. Oh my gosh, it looked unreal. It looked fake. The mountains looked fake from just the lake view. It was amazing. So I ended up parking in Apgar Village, which is on the southernmost end of the lake and in West Glacier. And Quincy and I were able to hike a cleared bike path, Apgar bike path, which was about 4 miles. It was sunny. It was in the 60s. It was just a beautiful day. Snow still covering the park. The roads were clear. The bike path was clear, but everything else was still pretty much covered in, I would say 3 to 6 feet of snow everywhere else. So I'm sure you could probably, if you wanted to, go snowshoeing or do some fun winter stuff at the park. But I felt so grateful to be able to see Lake McDonald and to go hiking to get into West Glacier. That was all the hiking I did, even though I was there for a few days, just because as I was in West Glacier, my car started giving me issues. So it has been 2 months since I took it in for servicing. It wasn't due for anything. It wasn't due for an oil change, but it started making a whining noise. So I took it into a local Honda dealership, and there were a couple of things that just needed to be replaced. My brakes needed to be replaced, and then a couple more items that are just due to mileage, honestly, just wear and tear on the vehicle and things that need to be replaced every so often. My brakes, of course, that does not surprise me that they need to be replaced because I've been going up and down mountains for the past 4 months. 3 months, 4 months. So it does not surprise me that the brake pads have worn out and that they needed to be replaced. So went and got that done. I was grateful that they were able to do all of the fixes in a day. Also, there's no sales tax in Kalispell, Montana. So if you want to buy anything, go to Kalispell, Montana. No sales tax. Made it great to see my car repair bill. Made me really happy that there was no sales tax attached. And at the end of that day, I treated myself to some Huckleberry Ice Cream. So huckleberries are very big. They're a big thing in Montana. And advertised everywhere. Didn't know this, but had to try some for myself. My Airbnb host recommended this spot in Kalispell that has Huckleberry Ice Cream. So that's where I went, tried some, got some. Was not expecting to like it because I really am not a fan of fruit in sweets. It's not my favorite thing. I will eat it, but it's not usually what I choose. Huckleberry seemed strange to me. I don't know. I just didn't have a good feeling about it, and it ended up it's my favorite thing in the whole wide world, and I recommend it to everybody. Oh my gosh, it's my favorite. It's my favorite Huckleberry ice cream. It's so delicious. It's got a great flavor, so highly recommended. Probably one of my favorite parts about the trip. and loved Kalispell too. If I went back, I would probably stay in Kalispell. Neat little town in Montana, and I would love to explore it more. So that is my adventures in Washington and northern Montana at Glacier National Park. If you have any questions, you can follow me on Instagram at JoyYugi. You can leave comments on my posts or my reels or shoot me a message that way. You can always watch this on my YouTube channel. Just search my name. And I would love it if you would subscribe to the podcast and, of course, rate it and review it to let me know how I'm doing. Until next time, I wish you happy travels wherever life is taking you.